If you're thinking about getting into sheep or goats, and this is, obviously like most of my videos, it can be more focused on goats, although I think most of the answers I would give are pretty much the same for sheep. There's a lot of people out there that are going to try to sell you a lot of stuff. Now, if you're a little bit more on my side of the fence, where you are a lower input producer, where you do not have umpteen hours of labor to put into the animals every day, and you do not want to be running in confinement, you want to be running in a grazing operation, there's actually not all that much equipment that you need starting off. There is stuff that you will want to get as time goes on, things like skid steers and side-by-sides, but you don't need those right off the bat. What I do want to talk about today is a couple of pieces of equipment, 2 to 3 pieces of equipment that I do recommend you get right off the bat before you even get the animals, if you were trying to do a for-profit meat goat grazing operation. And this kind of applies whether you're already a livestock person or whether you have no experience whatsoever. All right, so the first thing is right behind me here, and that is a good set of corral panels. Portable, universal. They can be, if you need a loading chute, if you need a crowding pen, if you need a working chute, if you need a catch pen, if you want to build a buds box, if you just need a gate someplace, you just need a gap filled in and a gate someplace. These can do all of those things. If you have enough of them, you can just stand up an entire confinement area and put those animals basically into a dry lot confinement situation with just corral panels alone. This is actually my second set. Both of the sets are homemade. The first set, as expanded here and up here around the kidding shed and whatnot, got used up for gates and whatnot in certain areas. And then there's a few, I think there's like 6 of them that are left over, that are just permanently stay up there in the kidding shed, just so if I need them up around here. They're kind of my emergency reserve or something like that. This set here, you've probably seen in other videos. It's on a rack here. I can pick up the rack up here with a skid steer and set it on a trailer and take it wherever I want. Most of the panels are actually out right now doing stuff, but I will pick those up. I'm actually kind of planning on picking them up later today. You don't necessarily need the rack to start off with, but having the panels is a really good idea. These are homemade and they're built out of old hog panels, like the 36-inch tall ones. And they got pretty big gaps here on the top. These panels are basically free. That's the panels that I built these on were basically free, so that's why I used them. But I will say goats do occasionally get their head stuck into them, so if you are buying a brand new set or something like that, that's something to look out for. Aluminum ones, these are like 50 pounds each, 40, 50 pounds each. Aluminum ones are like 15, but they're also pretty pricey. These cost me like $30 to $40 in materials each. An aluminum one, plus labor. An aluminum one, the ones I looked at a while back were like $250 per panel. So they get a lot more expensive. A little bit of a different angle on the panel rack and the panels themselves here. They just have little pins on the end and you pin them together. You can make gates, you can chain them together if you want to have areas where you don't want to have to use the pin. As long as they're at angles, they'll hold themselves up. They don't need posts or anything like that. They're heavy enough that if goats run into them, they're not going to knock them down usually. If you didn't set them up very well, they might, but generally speaking, that's not a problem. Another thing to think about is to have at least a few solid-sided panels, and I do. They're out right now, though, because those are real handy if you need a quick windbreak, an artificial windbreak someplace. But yeah, pretty underrated piece of equipment. If you're thinking about getting into goats and you want to do, grazing, commodity, for-profit meat animal production, I would actually recommend this be one of the first pieces of a big ticket equipment that you get into. I will mention in this video today, I'm not going to talk about every stupid, halters and buckets and stuff like that. I'm going to call those small ticket items, and those are generally items that you can just go to your local farm store and pick up anytime. You can't pick these up at your local farm store, at the tip of a hat. Yeah, they might have some panels on hand. They probably aren't really designed to be portable like this. They're probably designed to be like hanging gates and stuff like that. And they also aren't, it's not like going and buying a $5 bucket. These are going to cost some money, even if you build them yourself. The other thing, and you've seen this in other videos too, is more temporary fencing, and that is some sort of temporary fencing. Now, if you are, for your grazing portion of your operation, if you are not experienced with livestock and not experienced with electric fencing, I would actually not recommend starting with 2-strand poly wire with step-in posts. I only use that. I would actually recommend starting with poly netting. It's going to be a lot more forgiving. You can make mistakes a lot more with it and not pay as big a prices. If you get this stuff and you make a lot of mistakes over and over, what you'll actually end up doing is just teaching goats not to respect your fences. And that's a deep hole to dig back out of, to the point where I'd like just get new goats, honestly. Most of my grazing, I have permanent fencing set up around in the perimeter, and then we use this to cross fence and to split it into sections and graze little areas for certain periods of time. If I needed to, I could just set up boxes with just this and not have a perimeter fence at all. If I had a neighbor that, gave me an opportunity to do some grazing on their land, but they don't want to have the fences up permanently, there you go. If I need to put up some fencing to along maybe some winter wheat in the winter to move goats down the road, and I don't want them going over there and trying to eat all the wheat because that's what they'll try to do, I can put this fence up along there and I can do it real quick. There's a lot of different things that you can do with a good temporary fence setup. Whether it's netting or poly wire, it doesn't really matter. It's fencing, not a religion. But I would say keep in mind that you don't need poly netting as you scale up and everything. When you start wanting to put out significantly more fence, you will probably want to have, at least consider switching to poly wire over poly netting, just because it's a lot cheaper and a lot less labor intensive. The honest truth is a lot of people out there raising goats don't really need any shelter for their animals. The main band that's out right now, it's calm, there's no wind, there's nothing falling from the sky today, but even if there was, they don't have any artificial shelter out there. They got some natural windbreaks with trees and whatnot, but the artificial shelter here is really only used during really nasty weather events in the winter, blizzards and whatnot, and kidding season, and that's pretty much it. If you're going to invest in some shelter, I would recommend looking at small portable temporary shelters like this. These are quickly called calf shelters. They're designed so the calves can get in and get some shelter and the cows can't, so the cows can't crowd out the calves or anything like that. Bunch of different styles of them. These ones, just like the Corral panels, are homemade. They are anchored to the ground. They are very portable. I can move them around by hand if I really need to, or I can drag them around with a side-by-side or anything like that. The anchors are the same way. I don't need a skid steer or anything to dig holes for the anchors. They're just wolf fang anchors, same thing you use if you've ever done set trap lines before. Now, you will notice something about the pieces of equipment that I have recommended thus far. They are all temporary, portable, and they can be turned back into cash. Turn back into cash is important. I'm going to get this one out of the way the first time. I see a lot of people get into goats and get right back out of them. Maybe within a couple of months, maybe within a couple of years. They just decide it's not for them. Or they get into goats and maybe they have ideas about grazing and this and that, and they end up deciding that, no, I'm just going to have a few pets in my backyard. Okay, you probably don't need a $2,000 corral panel set up to have a couple of goats in your backyard. You probably want to get your money back out of that. And yeah, you can sell those corral panels, even the homemade ones too, but especially manufactured ones, if they got a brand name on them, you can get most of your money back out of them, especially if they're in good shape. Same thing with calf shelters. I built these, and I mentioned that they were pretty cheap to build. I can turn these back into cash very easily, and I could actually probably make money on them compared to the materials I put into them, not counting labor. Same thing with temporary fence systems. Those are actually pretty easy to sell as well. I've seen a lot of electro netting getting resold very successfully, people getting pretty decent prices for it. I personally have resold temporary fence reels and posts and got happy with the money I got back out of them for how used that they were, what condition they were in. So being able to thinking about when you're investing in stuff, being able to turn it back into cash is important. And like I said, it may not even be that you're getting out of goats. It may be that you just decided, oh, well, I'm not using that electro netting anymore because I installed a bunch of more permanent cross fencing and I just don't use it. I can sell some of it because I don't need all of it anymore. Something like that. The temporary and portable kind of go together. And that is, you have absolutely no idea what your operation, if you're just starting out, what your operation is going to look like in 5 or 10 years. I've been doing this a while, and I can't tell you, I don't really know for sure what my operation is going to look like in 5 or 10 years. I have a better idea than when I was just starting out, but you want to have those options to change things around. If we want to make the dry lots bigger here and I want to move these shelters, down the hill here a little bit, I can do that. If I want to, if we come across an opportunity and a neighbor is selling 50 head of Spanish nannies that we really like and really want, but we don't have any place to put them right now. I've got corral panels. I can set up a corral really, really quick. I can even take them over there and load them out because maybe they don't have any loading equipment. Kind of a bizarre scenario there, but it's not that far-fetched. Stuff like that does come up. A neighbor wants to say, hey, I'd like you to come graze my land. I'll give it to you for free. I just want it cleaned up. Boom, you got some temporary fencing to set that up. Keep your options open. Do not, like the opposite of this, would be going and building a bunch of permanent structures and building a bunch of permanent fencing with wooden posts set in concrete. It is very difficult to move and change. That's the opposite of this. Going and putting up a bunch of perimeter fencing around your pasture and doing a bunch of permanent cross fencing across your pasture. That's the thing where you're going to paint yourself into a corner and you're going to end up making decisions that didn't work out for you in the long term. And you're going to end up spending a bunch of money that if you want to change anything in the future, and you probably will, most people will, that becomes very expensive and difficult to do. All right, the next two pieces of equipment I'm going to recommend are a universal year-round solution for delivering water and delivering supplemental feed. Now, it does not necessarily need to be something this big, fancy, and expensive. I'm holding my first water delivery system that I ever owned. I think it was this actual bucket, in fact, right in my hand. It was also the first supplemental feed delivery system that I ever owned, right in my hand. And I didn't use hay, I would use range cubes or sometimes just pellets and corn. I don't remember which one I was using first, but other alternatives for delivering supplemental feed, square bales. You can just carry those with your hand. You don't need any special equipment to do those. Another alternative for something like a water cart, a hose. Hose works pretty good. In the winter, you'll need to make sure to drain the hose or store it inside so it doesn't freeze up on you, but that's about it. It can be pretty year-round for you, assuming that that's within range. What I use, and I'll probably make a video about this at some point in the future, but we use this water cart here. I talked about resale value on things. This is one thing where the resale value is a little questionable. I've never tried to sell it. I don't know. But I can't imagine wanting to sell it. It's super duper useful, and I will probably make a special video showing that off in the future. That is absolutely critical to how I do things here, this particular piece of equipment. And then also pretty important is this cart here. I use it for a lot of different things, but you can see the pitchfork on the side. One of the main things it's used for is to deliver supplemental feed, mostly in the winter, but sometimes in the summer. Occasionally we have drought situations or something happened and I wasn't able to get them rotated on time or something like that. Those are unusual, but they do happen, and you want to be able to have that option. Again, I'm talking about keeping options open here. Have the options to deliver water any time of year, anywhere you want it. Have options to deliver supplemental feed any time of year, anytime, anywhere you want it. So another thing is IBC totes and 55-gallon drums. Super duper useful for all kinds of things, from feed storage to making water tanks. You could even build shelters into these. I've seen people build carriers for the back of pickups out of these. All kinds of different stuff. I also use them to store firewood over here. They're not very expensive. If like $15-20 a piece if you're not in a hurry to buy them. Barrels, sometimes you can just get those for free, again, if you're not in a hurry to buy them. But even if you're paying for them, it's going to be like $5 or $10 a piece. They hold up super well. You can use them for water transport, all kinds of stuff. But they're not really pieces of equipment. They're more materials that are just super useful and universal, kind of like duct tape or zip ties. I did want to talk a little bit about livestock transport solutions. A livestock box for your pickup is a good start. I wouldn't necessarily say it's required right off the bat, but it's a pretty good idea. You can actually buy a really large pet carrier, and you'd be surprised how big of a goat you can shove into one of those things if you're motivated enough. So that is one option. I don't think you necessarily need it right off the bat. You don't need a super fancy one either. I've seen a lot of them built out of like IBC totes that probably cost, you know, a few dollars, literally. So you don't have to get super fancy with it. I will say on the stock trailer side of things, even if you have a lot of head and you think it merits a stock trailer, you know, consider that you could borrow, lease a stock, you know, borrow slash rent slash lease a stock trailer from a neighbor, something like that. Full disclosure, this stock trailer isn't owned. I lease it from my folks, actually. It's their backup to their backup stock trailer. It's their third one. 2 other stock trailers would have to break in some form or fashion before they would need this one. I lease it. I do pay money for it. And also on the condition that if they need it, I have to bring it back lickety split. But it is a nice piece of equipment, and eventually you will want to have it. Eventually you'll want to have a lot of things, but when you're first starting off, you want to be very cognizant about what you're putting your money into, and putting your money into things that you can get your money back out of, and things that keep your options open.